Hello, everybody. This is Brian Nelson Jr. I'm back with Nick Bailey from Fancounters.com Celebrity Podcast. Today we have the father of Still the Beaver, also known as the new Leave It To Beaver, Brian Levant. Brian Levant is probably, next to me, the biggest Beaver fan out there. He probably did the best adaptation of a revival series that has ever been done when he did the reunion movie, Still the Beaver. So Brian's going to give some more information about the show as well as other things that he's done in his career and what he is doing now. And like I said, I have Nick Bailey from fancounters.com. How you doing, Nick?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back on the website's show. And, this is exciting because you brought some of the other guests and I tracked down Brian. That was like my number one thing since we started. Everybody's like, oh, you got to talk to Brian. You got to talk to Brian. I'm like, so I'm telling you, Brian, Brian, I'm going to find this guy. And the way that I got to him is amazing. He doesn't have any contact information online. He's very hard to find, but his lawyer's name is on there. So I sent a message to the lawyer and I said, we've been doing all these interviews. Can you set us up? And he forwarded the lawyer. I said, and this is how I was like, I know you're not in the business of forwarding emails to your clients for interviews. I said, but would you do it? And then
Never hurts to ask.
Right. An hour later, I got a response from Brian. So he definitely got the message that way.
Well, it is so cool to be able to talk to him because I tell you what, there have been so many questions that I've wanted to ask Brian since I was a little kid because, like I said, I buried myself into this new Leave It To Beaver as soon as I found it. So it's very cool to be able to talk to him.
All right, let's get started. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Brian Levant, welcome to the show. Thanks for being a part of our podcast.
Pleasure. I don't think I've ever been on a podcast before.
Really?
Really?
Well, that's great. We want to talk all things new Leave It To Beaver, but we also have other questions we want to fit in along the way. Let's start with that 1983 revival project called Still the Beaver, which then became the TV series The New Leave It To Beaver. Brian and I both want to know your involvement in the revival of the series and how you helped create this amazing reunion.
As I'm writing in my new book of my toy collection with very, very little recollections I'm discovering there's room for, that when I was a junior in high school one winter, watching as I did many, many days after school at my friend, the twins' house, and instead of thinking about doing my homework or track practice or something like that, I said to myself, gee, in reference to the boys, I wonder what they're doing today. And somehow that thought sort of metastasized to when I arrived in L.A. in 1975. I made a list of things I wanted to do, and one of them I called Still the Beaver. And so once I really had a leg up in the business, i.e. was producing network series, I was very young, very fortunate to have a lot of opportunities that, lucky for me, I made good on. Once I had a little credibility, I teamed up with Nick Abdo, another former Happy Dayser, who worked with us on on Brothers and Sisters as well. And he had a relationship with Bob Harris at Universal, who was the network executive for Happy Days when he was at ABC. Okay. And from that point on, it took 3.5 years before we got in front of CBS, and the worst pitch of my life, the most important pitch of my life, and I blew it, and they decided to do the project, but not with me.
Oh.
And then they got the script that they ordered, and all of a sudden it was, can you do something with this? And an amazing thing happened. Number one, I was so anxious to write it that I did it start to finish, I believe, in 11 days.
Wow.
and turned it in. And Jane Rosenthal, now Robert De Niro's partner, then the one of the key executives at CBS Movies of the Week. Remember, they used to do like 30 a year. And so I went in for notes, and they didn't have any.
That's unusual.
Fortunately and unfortunately, they hired a director with no sense of humor who didn't seem to matter to him whether the cast, who'd been for the most part on mothballs for a long time, we built in the budget, ample rehearsal time. He didn't take advantage of it, and it showed. And his lack of involvement showed. But, however, had he, irregardless of that, the film, which Nick worked very hard to make as good as it could be, was the number 2 movie of the week for the year, and in the overnight markets, in all the 8 overnight markets, in the last half hour, we had over a 50 share. And despite those facts, CBS was not interested in the revival series, and Ned Nall, a young executive at the newly formed Universal Cable division, called me and said, "I think we should take this." Now, Ned Nall, I will back up. When Leave It To Beaver was canceled, he wrote a letter of protest to, quote, Mr. ABC. So another longtime Beaver fan, and Ned and I went to the Disney Channel, and they bought it in the room, and it was the first co-production between the two studios and the last. As it turned out, we did 26 incredibly successful episodes for them, and then they got into a fight over real estate in Orlando, and we got the brunt of it. But because they did that, Universal said, "Oh yeah, we'll show you," and they kept us in production and gave us more money to spend, incredibly. And we retitled the Still the Beaver, as it was known on the Disney Channel, as Wally and the Beaver, the original title of Leave It To Beaver, and that when Ted Turner bought it with the largest order in the history of network television, 74 episodes.
Wow.
We changed at his insistence, and who could turn that down? Titled The New Leave It To Beaver, the only name I never wanted it to be.
Small sacrifices.
Yes, and so I spent 5 incredible years, challenging years, battling studios, battling the weather, battling budgets, schedules, and things, and trying to navigate a writer's strike and regrouping from that with a fresh start and opening a new studio in a city where there really wasn't any production to speak of, and always the most memorable part of it is to be part of the Cleaver family. Watching the show, I think that's what people always, deep down, I think the continued fascination with it as a cultural touchstone was that that was an idealized American family, and people did want to be part of the Cleaver family. Now, one of the first things I learned, when I started was that they aren't the Cleavers, and I had to build a relationship with the characters who played the characters, and I did, and we all embraced each other and our purpose. And despite the cancellation, the uncertainty, everything else that went along with it, we had Kip Marcus, who has a wonderful, he's a very successful Amazon executive. Today, had a tumultuous childhood which spilled over, and everybody, he lived with me for a year and a half, and everybody on the set, really helped keep this kid on level footing, so he wouldn't go off the edge like so many do.
He's our next guest, by the way.
You're kidding me?
Yep.
How nice!
Sometime in the next week
say
or
hi.
so. I will.
So him and his, were they married yet? I don't think they were married. Maybe they were, but they lived with us for a year. So he lived with us when he was 13, and you catch him with Shannon Doherty on the pool table, and then he comes back with his wife, and I'm stealing their ice cream. So yes, it really has. Ken Osmond's son Eric, who appeared at age 10 in the movie of the week, is Eddie Haskell Jr. and actually won the competition to play Freddie Haskell in the series. After we finished the show, he went to film school at the University of Southern California and would intern with me in the summer. And when he graduated, he came to work for me and developed an interest in editing. And finally worked his way into the union on Viva Rock Vegas, and he cut both of my Scooby Doo movies. And today he's one of the key editors at Illumination, where my last project is going to be.
Your last, as in you're going to do something that's going to be your last?
6 years.
So walk us through the process of getting everything, gathering the actors, and
it wasn't all that hard. I worked with one of them. Rich Carell was the associate producer of Happy Days when I was the supervising producer and showrunner with Fred Fox, and I lived, believe it or not, next door to Richard Deacon, who played Clarence Lumpy Rutherford's father on the original series and was in the movie of the week, and unfortunately passed away. Actually, I saw the ambulance driving away as I'm typing a scene with him in it for the Thanksgiving show. Talk about irony. And so Rich took Nick and I down to, my goodness, where was it? Somewhere, San Clemente, where Tony and Jerry were touring dinner theaters very successfully nationwide and appearing on Saturday Night Live while they were doing it and stuff with So Long Stanley. And so after the show, it was arranged that we'd meet, and I shook hands with Tony and said, "Hi, I'm going to bring back Leave It To Beaver." And he goes, "Yeah, I've heard that before."
Well, you showed them.
So, like I said, one had to, build a new relationship, one built on trust with people who had kind of grown wary of people who took advantage of them.
Sure.
And and I don't know, I mean, they all sort of discovered that no one really saw them in other roles. And I think deep down, they didn't either. And, so, Ken had a helicopter shuttle business. He became a policeman. Frank Bank moved into bonds. Oh, my goodness. Barbara, I can't tell you how wonderful it was to work with her, what a joyous person she was, how much she loved the show, how much she doted on the kids of both generations, how, I think Tony was closer to her than he was with his own mother, truly. I mean, and she was just a delight and funny and loved to laugh and loved the series. And I always, when I think about her these days, the first things that cross my mind is every Monday. I used to love Mondays because that's the day when everyone would gather and read next week's script and the week after that for the first time, and afterwards they'd go off and rehearse. We'd go start rewriting, and during lunch the cast would all come in and crowd into an office, and there'd be Barbara sitting on the floor eating out a styrofoam. Right, in her 80s, and laughing and having fun and enjoying every second, not only of her TV family, but her real family as well. And she was just beloved. Carrie Myers, who was our associate producer, very capable post-production person, who did the show at Barbara's funeral, told a great story that they were, Barbara lived in Malibu for many years. and she was walking down the street in Malibu, came to a homeless person, and Barbara opens her purse and takes out a $5 and is handing it to the homeless person, who looks at her and goes, "Oh my God, you're Barbara Billingsley." And everybody knew her, everybody loved her. I think for the first time on our show, he wanted to quit, and yet and he called her to tell her that, and she talked him down, and and he did great from then on. And he only knew her tangentially, but she meant so much to him and so much to many people. Being out in public as I have over the years with people like Ron Howard and Tony and Jerry, so many people come up to me and say, "I felt like I grew up with you." And that to me, just that these people eliminated that wall, that screen that was in between them, and you felt for them and related to them because they were like you, and thus, it forms a bond that, sometimes the people inside the TV don't quite understand, as well as like I do, who wanted to reach through the TV as well. And one of the few who managed to do it, I guess.
I get that a lot from celebrities, because on Fancounters every week for the last 110 weeks, I've interviewed a new celebrity. And that's the one thing that they always say is people will come up to them and act like they know, like you're supposed to know who this person is. Well, they've watched you on TV and they've never met you, but there's that connection where you feel like you know them.
I've been guilty of it as well.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's that is when someone's in your living room for 35, 40 years, you get used to them.
Yeah. Brian and I have some questions that have always been on your mind, our mind. So if they are random sounding,
I hope they're on my mind as well, for the sake of your listeners.
They don't all. They're not all going to tie together, but we're going to give you some quick hits to see what kind of
quick
ideas
hits.
you can.
Okay, quick hits. So this is like password. Okay.
It's a little less exciting than that, but we'll
okay.
try. We'll try. I was a child of the 90s, as was Brian. So growing up in the late 80s and 90s, watching these shows, I was one of those people that kind of felt like, we could relate to the kids of the shows. It does seem like in the 90s especially, it became the kiss of death for a TV show when the main character has a baby. So when Mary Ellen got pregnant with Kevin, was the series kind of, don't take this personally, but was it running out of ideas or?
Absolutely not. We were in the midst of a long, here's the thing. I worked on 2 series that went 11 years, and everybody on those shows would have been happy to do 13 or 14. So what I was doing, and if you watch the last season carefully, you see that Kip Marcus was at NYU and would join us very sporadically the last season. He was a freshman at NYU, and he'd come down on vacations, and we worked very closely, with him and his schedule so that he really was part of the series. And, he missed classes when he could. But we brought in Ken Osmond's youngest son, Christian, also fondly nicknamed as was his character Bomber, and we were really grooming John Snee to be Wally, and in the hopes that we would be on long enough so that Kevin Cleaver would become the new Beaver, so to speak. And this is the trick I learned on Happy Days. Well, when you did the shows where Richie got his first car and then Richie was gone, well, it was time for Joni to get her first car.
Yeah.
And thus is the cycle of comedy life. But I was planning on, hoping on, as long a run as people would have us. I think that everybody, by the time we got to 101 episodes, that the syndicators, the studio, and Turner felt that was a good package. They were selling it in the syndication market just in time for the syndication market to collapse. Had we not been canceled by the Disney Channel, we would have been in the syndication, the absolute peak, selling at the absolute peak of the syndication market. That 1 year put us at the bottom of the waterfall.
And it would have only been a quarter of the amount of shows, too.
Well, no. I'm saying had we continued with the Disney Channel and made 100 episodes,
right?
And that was in the contract that when you got to a magic number, it went to syndication. That was Universal. What did they care about a show on the Disney Channel?
Yeah.
So yes, no. So and he's we haven't heard from that kid in a long time. I hope he's okay. And we didn't scar him.
Who was that, Kevin?
Yes. Troy Davidson.
Correct. I was wondering. That was one of my questions.
So Troy got...
What his name was?
No, I knew what his name was. I was just wondering if you knew where he was or what he was doing these days. But you answered
No,
that
he's
question,
I can tell you where John Snee is every hour of the day, and where Eric and Kalina, who comes with, was just here a couple of months ago with their kids for a week, and we're all still family.
Now, Kevin got aged up. A lot of series have done that, where they have a baby and then all of a sudden he's talking. Are the writers, the producers worried that the audience might not quite get that jump, or that it might upset audiences that you went so fast?
I think we're so used to it and understand that a 18-month-old really can't act, but a 3 or 4-year-old certainly can.
That's right.
and we held off as long as we physically could. But no, if you look at the show, John was growing up, and growing out of the younger brother part, really.
Right.
And so we sped up his development. And the last season, we did some very, very, very funny things with him, especially like applying to private school. One of my favorite jokes is, being tested, and the woman holds out a handful of crayons, and you go, "Now, how many crayons am I holding?" And he goes, "Don't you know?"
Well, it says 8.
which to me is a perfect Beaver joke.
Yeah, and I think all the fans that saw the new show kind of felt that, that he was the Beaver character. In that.
Well, he certainly looked the part, as did John when we cast him when he was 7.
So one of my questions is this: in one of the episodes where Wally and Mary Ellen, they go to their high school reunion. Yes. The lead singer for the band looks a lot like Fred Fox Jr. Was that him?
It is. Fred used to perform. Fred performed on Happy Days and a couple of times at Camp Marshallmont, the annual gathering of the staffs of all Gary's shows, and an entertaining and informative morning. And Fred would perform with Rich Carell and a couple other guys from the shows, and it was always a crowd pleaser, and he amuses me greatly. So I never fail an opportunity to put him in tights either.
So yeah, actually, when I was about 9 or 10 years old when I first saw that, and I recognized him from the rap party, because he's one of the guys talking in the rap party, and I thought, man, that looks just like that. But he doesn't appear in the credits, so you can't.
Of course not.
And I was always a credit guy, even young on. I always read the credits, and
I don't think they let us put more like like 1 or 2 credits every week.
Right. So yeah, it was. Yeah. So now the mystery is solved.
It was expensive. You had to make it over every week.
Totally. I did have a question about the episode. It's called "A Part of Life," where it talks about death and pretty sensitive subject, especially back then, and yet you're involving the kids. Obviously, it happened right around the time that the real Aunt Martha passed away. I'm wondering if that had anything for like an homage or.
Well, sure. We loved using her. She appeared, and we made her look much younger. in our 30th anniversary show, Ensign Cleaver, and we were planning on using her again, and she did pass away. And yes, I do believe that did inspire it, and once again, Kevin, when you said immediately the line that, he was being left behind with the sitter while they went to the cemetery, and he goes, "Where are you guys going?" And well, he goes, "We're going to say goodbye to Aunt Martha." I thought she was dead.
So 5-year-old of a
Right.
Yeah.
Brian, a lot of fans want to know why Mary Ellen was chosen as the wife of Wally instead of Julie Foster. Was it ever considered, being that Cheryl Holdridge was?
Yes, I believe at that time, Cheryl Holdridge. Cheryl Holdridge is married very well. She was married to Lance Reventlow. Cheryl Holdridge, for those who don't know, was one of the original Mouseketeers who played Mary Ellen Rogers in the original series when Disney would let her out, or maybe it might have been no Walt Disney was still on then, and I believe she married Lance Reventlow, the Revlon heir, who was a race car driver, who unfortunately died behind the wheel. And she lived quite a nice life in Aspen, and at some point she married one of the heirs to the Post fortune.
Wow!
and he died, and then she, very young, died of lung cancer. Though I don't believe she was a smoker, and I was very happy to have her back playing, the femme fatale at the high school reunion. And she also appeared in, did a cameo for me in Viva Rock Vegas.
Nice. And I've got some questions coming up about the Flintstones, but we'll finish here.
Sure.
So the cast list, number one.
Okay, but Janice, we love Janice.
Oh, definitely. She was brilliant,
and she was terrific and a wonderful foil, and someone who very realistically portrayed somebody who spent too much time with their in-laws.
She handled it quite well, I must say.
I know, but you always saw a little bit of, oh my God, doesn't anybody knock?
I always thought the same thing. They just walk in like it's their house, But it's the Cleavers. We're family,
I know, but it would be wrong if they knocked.
Oh, exactly. So my question is this: Kip Marcus, which I'll note right away that there's a parallel between the old series and the new series, that just like Tony Dow, he was cast after Paul Sullivan, and Kip Marcus,
Paul Sullivan grew 6 inches in
the
summer.
Right.
After the pilot.
Exactly.
Which, just in case people don't know, the original pilot called It's a Small World, with Barbara Billingsley and Jerry Mathers and Harry Shearer, basically in the Eddie Haskell part, along with people who would become Beaver regulars like Richard Deacon and Diane Brewster. It was played off in the Heinz Summer Theater, and therefore after that went to literally the salt mines in Indiana, where Ned Nall stumbled across it, looking for things he could sell to cable, and we aired it for the first time since 1957 as part of our 30th anniversary.
Yeah, that was the first time it aired since the original airing, correct?
Absolutely.
So that was really cool. So I was one of the ones.
We had to edit it. It was too long.
Right. Because back in 1957, there was maybe one. The sponsor said
2
something.
2 minutes of commercial.
Right.
Yeah.
The sponsor said something, and then you watch the show.
Well, Remington's brought to you by. Well, anyway, this was Heinz Theater. They would have been selling ketchup, and mustard, and pickles, 57 varieties.
Yep. So with Kip, if you read in like the cast list, his character is listed as Kip Ward Cleaver II or Jr. Was that like a private homage, or were at some point were you going to reveal that?
Yeah. No, his real name. I can't remember if award in the middle or first. But yeah, of course, I was crushed that literally the morning after I finished that 11-day first draft of the script, which included 5 pages of flashbacks of Hugh Beaumont. I wake up, to watch Leave It To Beaver on WTBS at 6 a.m., and I go out and I grab the Sunday paper, I open it up, and Hugh Beaumont had died.
Oh.
And so I went upstairs and took out the flashbacks.
Brian, you're a little like the Grim Reaper. Every time you write about somebody, they're passing away.
Hey, don't ask me about Ross Martin or Harvey Lembeck or many others.
There's more.
Oh, boy.
Jonathan Wynn. Oh, God, the list goes on.
But actually,
anybody who's been around 45 years has those stories.
Oh, yeah. And actually, for correction, yes, it was Ward Kip Cleaver. That's what it was.
There you go.
The second, yes.
Brian, on Fancounters, we talked to Tammy Walker O'Rourke. I have ever since been collecting stories about Heather O'Rourke just for fun. And you were the executive producer and writer for both episodes that featured Heather. Can you share with us some memories?
First she was on Happy Days.
Yes.
Of course, she came to fame as a little girl in Poltergeist.
Yep.
And the 10th season of Happy Days, when I returned from Ork to Milwaukee, we were faced with a series that no longer had Aaron Moran and Scott Baio as regulars. They were off doing their ill-conceived, gratefully short-lived spin-off, and Fonzie had lost Richie and Ralph, and and so in an effort to find a new center for the show and to have it continue to grow and mature, we decided that Fonzie should have a regular girlfriend, that it should be the estranged daughter of the Fisters of Milwaukee, the owners of things like the Pfister Hotel.
The haunted hotel, yes.
And that she would have a daughter. And we cast Heather. We did look at a lot of other people, and Heather Henry, before we cast her, Henry sat down and worked with her, played with her, talked with her for about 3.5 hours, and said, book her. And we did, and she was a delight, and the audiences loved her, and it brought out a very sensitive, sweet side of Fonzie. And that was good for us, but having a regular girlfriend wasn't especially good for the series.
Yeah, it kind of breaks it.
For the character. And the next year, they moved on. But we loved having, and that's how I knew the family, of course, and we loved having her. She was great. Instead of playing sweet, for her to play mean.
Mm-hmm. Yep, she was kind of nasty.
And she played it quite well.
Hey, all women deep down, that's what they want to play. That's the role they want. It was. It's hard to say what was a sadder funeral, that or Phil Hartman, but there weren't any in the league with those two. Oh my God, those were just crushing to lose a little girl to sepsis. I don't think she was 10. To tell you the truth. So let's talk about something happier.
All right, let's do it.
Well, I have a question that I've had for years, decades. There, in an episode, it's called Gosh Wally, where he crashes on a motorcycle, and he has flashbacks about his life, and really cool episode. It's written by the same name as Whitey's real name.
Total coincidence.
Hubert, it wasn't. I was going to ask if it was a pseudonym for a writer.
Yes, it is.
Is that writer Brian Levant?
No.
Okay.
It is not.
Okay.
It is not. As the showrunner, you work with writers and you work out every beat. And they go out and do it, and then you rewrite them and rewrite them and rewrite them and rewrite them. But no, I love that show, and I think it's very poignant. I loved the things we did. So Wally, it's one of those episodes where somebody gets into a car accident and you spend the next half hour floating in and out of their life, worrying about if they're going to live or not. And we visited many key points in Wally's life. We and his relationship with his wife, and best of all, we cut Tony Dow in 1988 into 1959 footage of the family having dinner, and we got to use a couple of things that had been sitting on the cutting room floor that we used just as certain as they were moments and they weren't scenes, and thus in a show that was built around moments, they fit very nicely, and we're all very, very proud of that, and it was a different show, and and I think that that doing those kind of things and the musical we did and Man's Greatest Achievement were the things that really started to tell me that it was time for me to move on, because my stories and my shooting were becoming more elaborate, and I needed a bigger challenge.
Well, let's go into one of those, a challenge, probably not the one you're thinking of, but let's talk a little bit about movies for a little bit.
Sure.
You did the Flintstones movie and the Viva Rock Vegas. You did Scooby Doo. So I'm always curious, when you are writing an adaptation from a cartoon, are you watching hours and hours of that cartoon to make sure you get it right, or are you just reinventing?
When I did the Scooby meeting, and doing the Flintstones was a dream come true to work on both films. Besides Steven Spielberg with Kathy Kennedy, now the chairman of Lucasfilm, my producing partners, Colin Wilson and Bruce Cohn, both of whom, here we are 25 years later, they've got Academy Awards on their mantle for Best Picture, and we're talking about my Scooby Doo movies. What an amazing cast, an amazing marketing campaign, amazing results. I mean, the Flintstones in today's dollars is well over $1 billion gross. And throughout it, my favorite moments were those that I spent with Hanna and Barbera themselves. They were the kindest, most decent, interesting men I've ever known, and I admired them and the fact that they became icons and wealthy and very content men, doing nothing but trying to make kids laugh their entire long lives, and I will never forget showing them the Flintstones for the first time. And I was very nervous, and also Hoyt Curtin, the man who, their close associate, who wrote the Flintstones theme and the theme song of every other show they ever did, and I was very nervous as they watched, and they were kind of quiet, and it was over, and the lights came up, and now these guys are both past their mid-80s. And they leapt out of their seats and they ran to me and hugged me. They're crying. I couldn't believe it. And so even on the day of my meeting on Scooby Doo, I couldn't remember Daphne's name. The thought of continuing to work beside them in some way is what made me want to do it. And I ended up working with an amazing group of kids and a lot of beaver people, and I think we really kicked ass on Scooby Doo. We tested everyone. These are not the Scooby Doo features with Freddie Prinze Jr. These are the live-action CGI films made prequels made for the Cartoon Network, which remain the Cartoon Network's highest-rated shows of all time. Both films, Scooby Doo: The Mystery Begins and Curse of the Lake Monster, which came out a year later. It's a pity we didn't get to do more. We had scripts for two more of them ready to go, and loved every minute of it. Loved the material. Loved these kids, their energy, their hustle, their desire to learn. And here you are today. Robbie Amell is becoming a huge star. Haley Kiyoko is tearing up the charts, and actually she's got a brand new EP out. Just dropped Tuesday. I noticed. Grammy winner, and appeared in several other acting things. But I think her career is all music. But when she was doing Scooby, she'd show me YouTube videos she shot with her just playing an acoustic guitar in her bedroom, like a 15-year-old,
wow.
which is what she was. And here she is, top of the world. Great to see.
Now, going back to the Flintstones, there was a 6-year gap between the release of the first film and the second. And
no. It came out in 1999.
Wasn't the first one 1994?
Yes, released May 22nd,
okay.
1994. And that was released 1999.
Okay. I definitely trust you. You got the dates right. My question, though, is about recasting the major roles. Was it a budget thing, or did the four not want to come back?
I think at some point that we didn't even know because we were planning, to do more with that cast. At some point, John came to Stephen, and I think too many people had been saying yabba dabba doo at airports to him.
Oh.
And he said, "Please don't make me do any more of these."
That's too bad.
That's too bad, but this isn't the kind of thing where John's heart is.
Right.
And I'm actually surprised he went back to Roseanne. I guess it's much better for him now that she's not there. But it's too bad. They were such talented people, and the prequel, when we showed it to Stephen, he turned around and said, "I think you made a better movie." Audiences didn't agree.
I like them both. I told Cindy I was a fan of both of them.
Yeah, no, I love the musical numbers. I loved Mark Addy, and Jane Krakowski. Just ran into her the other night, and she's on what's that new show on Apple TV? I wish I could remember the name. Dickinson, very going to be a big Emmy contender next year. Kristen Johnson was a mess. Stephen Baldwin wasn't really engaged. Joan Collins was a treat. Harvey Korman I loved. Had been in 3 or 4 of my films altogether. It just didn't meet Alan Cumming. My God, look at all the talented people we had there. What am I doing working with all of them? And it was really great, and audiences didn't. I think as my wife said, once they've seen the cars and the costumes, you've seen it.
Maybe, but Jurassic Park just keeps going on and on and on. So
yeah, well, the director bowed out, not the stars.
Right. So, Brian, you're from Chicago. Have you returned to the Windy City to create any projects there? I mean, but have you made projects in Chicago?
No, I wish. I wish
you would too.
I've only made one project in L.A. since '98.
Well, you've made a career out of creating some good family entertainment. We appreciate that.
Well, thank you. We try, I loved every minute of it. I think that Jingle All The Way, which really kind of, I went to director jail for a while for that one.
I like that too.
I was, and then I was a repeat offender for the second Flintstones movie. But Snow Dogs got me out, and that led to Are We There Yet, which is was a huge hit that never got any credit for, but that's okay. I think we made Cube a much more of a safer name for families.
Yeah.
And without betraying his persona or his roots. And I'm very proud of that. I'm probably not the first person to talk out loud about it, but I mentioned Illumination earlier. And thanks to my son, I just sold an original story to Illumination for an original CGI musical.
Wow.
That is going to be produced by and music by Pharrell Williams.
Wow. Does that have a name that you can give us or no?
We'll see what they name it. I know what I named it.
Okay. I forget that those things are always changeable. Yeah. Well, then you must have an answer to this one. Do you think today, when you look at everything that's coming out, are true family-friendly projects still getting funded and created? Ones that you really can.
I think that things have changed, and the family marketplace, the films that I made and a lot of other people made, maybe Adam Sandler included in that, which were medium-budget films that reached wide audiences, but with probably limited marketing appeal and often limited sequel appeal. Although somehow 11 sequels have been made to my films. Not many by me, though. And so I think the CGI film has replaced them in the marketplace, where there are much greater opportunities, for sequelization, for merchandising. They do play to a huge swath of the audience. Pixar, Blue Sky, Illumination, DreamWorks, they've all been monstrously successful in delivering, really, 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 really high quality work, and have found global appeal doing it. And I think that's where the family marketplace is. However, I look at ABC, and to me, watching it the past few years, it has been as family oriented as it was back when Thursday nights on ABC was Leave It To Beaver, Ozzie and Harriet, My Three Sons, and Donna Reed.
Oh, I give ABC credit. They've got some of the best comedies, for sure.
Yes, they do, and they're appealing to a broad audience. I don't know how that works for advertisers.
Yeah.
Everybody's hustling for the same, for who's in the demographic. Well, in the demographic are tiny numbers compared to what they were 10, 15 years ago. So they're fighting over a smaller and smaller piece of the pie. So you have to be more inclusive in some respects. But as we speak, everything the marketplace is shifting again. When you see the penetration of all the new streaming services coming, it's the ground is changing very quickly.
So a lot of people in our age group, which within we were watching, our childhood was 30 some years ago, and a lot of the stuff that you've worked on, Happy Days, Mork and Mindy, Charles in Charge, Married with Children.
Only as a favor to Scott, please.
What are some memories that you? Oh, and by the way, I must mention we are just west of Milwaukee. I grew up in the in the Milwaukee area, so Happy Days is a real big deal for us because we're from this area.
One of my favorite memories from Happy Days is when I started on the show, they let me play on the softball team, and that summer I had a rare display of power, which led to a regular slot with the team. And they were asked twice. They'd been to Dodger Stadium to play, as an opening act against a media team. Bring out thousands and thousands and thousands of families early, hungry, eating, and stay for the game, build new audience. And so with Gary's permission, Fred and I set out to widen that net. And we ended up playing 27 games in major and minor league parks, many of them as charity events, places like the Superdome, and playing as an opening act. And we'd go for the weekend, and we'd go to New York and play in Philadelphia on Saturday night, and then Sunday play in Shea Stadium in Chicago, or go to Portland on Saturday and Seattle on Sunday, and go play in front of the Giants, the Angels, holy Christ,
that's amazing.
The Padres, and 2 USO tours of Germany and Okinawa and Japan. And the best one of all of them was the weekend we went to Chicago to play in my hometown in historic Wrigley Field, and then traveled to Milwaukee. And when we drove up from Chicago, and the last 3 miles, kid you not, the last 3 miles on the way to the old stadium there, was a county stadium, I believe it was called.
Yep, the Big
were
Tin
lined
Can.
with people waving and applauding, and some people were crying as the bus went by. And inside the stadium was filled to capacity, and they put us up against a team that we had no business being on the field against. Composed entirely of former professional athletes.
Oh man, no chance.
And we beat them.
Oh wow!
This was not
were those
unusual.
Cubs?
We in all the years I was there, we lost 5 games, twice to the Lakers, with Magic Johnson and Kurt Rambis and Michael Cooper and Pat Riley and all. And we had them until the last inning. It was just like an old Lakers game. Then they'd pour it on at the end. We lost to the Miami Dolphins. We lost to a service team in Germany, and because Fred Fox made an error, and Henry Winkler was so mad he didn't talk to him for 6 months.
Hey.
And lastly, we lost a game to a media team at Dodger Stadium that we didn't need to, but and also won our league championship. So, playing in Milwaukee was very special. I know that I wasn't invited, but everyone else went to Milwaukee when Nickelodeon installed the Bronze of the Fonz ceremony, inaugurating a statue of Fonzie in Milwaukee. And
he stands right outside the lakefront.
I think that speaks to itself. It was the place that Happy Days holds in the city's heart.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, we are about to wrap this up. I have one more question. I think Brian has one more for you. My last question is, we do a lot on Fancounters about fan encounters. So has anybody been a fan of yours that has left kind of a mark in your memory about somebody excited to meet you or anything like that? Do you have any?
I've had several fans. One kid in Vancouver who was a huge fan, and I loved him and tried to get him to work for me, and it was a bad time for him. And I have another fan, a kid. You can find him on Instagram at Rumor Skywalker, RUMOUR Skywalker. And he has been on a quest to manufacture Turbo Man dolls, and he is successful in selling them. So if you want a Turbo Man, contact Rumor Skywalker on Instagram.
I saw that on there, and I wondered if that was legit.
And I've consulted with him and helped him, and that's his dream. And so many people, I mean, artists, I get so much fan art about Jingle. Who knew that was going to be the classic? Who knew? Certainly not me. I'm always very appreciative. I get a rare letter from someone, but I spend most of my time right now. I teach comedy writing. By writing scripts with classes in like a writing room at the University of Arizona and the University of New Mexico, where I'm headed next week, and I love working with kids, and it's very funny. They know my work, but they never want to do that. So what's Arnold really like? But it's great, and I'm not in it for the recognition. I'm in it for the laughs. Speaking of Instagram, people can follow me on my Instagram and
I follow you.
My toy collection, which I'm doing a book on. My Instagram is surprisingly at Brian Levant, Levant, Brian with an I. And like I said, I'm working almost every day, trying desperately to finish. It's been 8 years. A book called My Life in Toys, which covers my toy collection, which overlaps severely with my career in the almost everything I've ever worked on. I've been cursed and blessed to have nothing but action figures and lunch boxes and other paraphernalia.
Yeah, that would be my house if it was definitely, if I had one big enough.
Oh, it is my house. So
oh,
luckily
definitely.
My wife
Right.
is not the kind of person who says you can only have this in your office, like many collectors I know.
Well, the funny thing is you had autographed an old TV guide when the new Leave It to Beaver movie was coming out, and you autographed that for me. And there's a picture of you holding up the picture and a picture of you signing the picture, and in the background I had seen the two Cleaver houses in your collection, which by the way was built by the first member of the new Leave It to Beaver fan page on Facebook when I first created
Mark Bradley.
Mark Bradley, that is correct. And by the way, he told me to send my regards and say hello to you.
Wonderful. Great story with him. Very quickly, because I got to go, and I think your listeners are pretty sick of me by now.
Oh, I'm
not. Mark Bradley walks into our office in Orlando, and we're just getting started with what he called an HO scale model, incredibly detailed of the both Cleaver houses, and he puts it down on the table, and he points to the upstairs window on the right, and he says, "This is what the window you use for the boys' bedroom, right?" And I go, "Yeah, it's been that way since 1959." And he goes, "Well, actually, the way the stairs let out, this would be the window." And he points to,
we've
to
had
the
that
other
discussion.
side of the building. And I said, "Get this man a job."
So my last question is this then, and we'll wrap things up.
Okay.
If there were to be if the Cleavers were to come back today, what would be happening in Mayfield? Now, I personally think, and I always put this out there, Wally would have to be a judge.
Well, I think it's that's much like what happened when Andy Hardy Comes Home of 1957, and was part of the inspiration for making Wally a lawyer, in fact. But yes, it's silly to speculate because there isn't going to be a reunion of any kind. But I will tell people that the still the new Leave It to Beaver episode we did, which took place in the 30-something years in the future, 2014,
yep.
I believe, tells the story of what would have become in a sci-fi world where teleporters exist and clones and things of that nature.
Yeah, and that was 2014. That has
with
been passed
I
and
might
gone.
add, Academy Award nominee Joaquin Phoenix as a 12-year-old as a Cleaver.
Yes, and when he just did this Joker movie, I thought, man, I watched him when he was a kid, when he was a teenager.
So, Brian, you're saying that Janice Kent is not going to get a dream come true and have this show return?
No. Janice started this campaign as short ago as 1992, and I told her, I'm sorry, there isn't the marketplace anymore. The awareness is starting to fade. I appreciate you guys and your interest, but even Leave It to Beaver, I think that the tires are starting to wear a little thin.
Well, if you brought the new series out there, I know there's circulation of lost, the episodes are gone, but I'm sure, there's cast, crew or people that have those available.
We don't have broadcast quality versions of. Maybe they do at the video houses. I don't know. No one's tried. No one's start a petition with Hulu to play it. Or actually, better yet, Peacock. That's the one Universal owns. Anyways,
there you go.
Right. There's a goal for you.
There you go. Right.
At least get it back on the air and get all of us some more residuals.
There you go.
I miss it, and I miss seeing it. All right, I see the people more than I see the show.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us. We do
That's
really
been a pleasure,
appreciate it.
guys.
Yeah,
Thank you for being such fans.
Oh, you bet.
And
Thank you.
and for doing such an interesting show. All right, take care now.
Take
yeah,
care.
you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, we want to thank Brian Levant for joining us for this podcast episode today. And please check out the Facebook fan pages, specifically the new Leave It To Beaver / Still the Beaver fan page. That one actually is about Brian Levant's show, and you can get more information about that. Also, check out the podcast, Fancounters.com, which is available at any podcast where podcasts are available. And so we'll wrap this up, and we'll be back very soon with another new Leave It To Beaver guest, and we'll talk to you then.